In today's episode, we have a wonderful guest host, Pete Bush. Pete is a CFP and certified exit planning advisor and the co founder and CEO of Horizon Financial Group, a multi division wealth management firm based in Baton Rouge. For over 34 years, he has primarily worked with business owners, executives, and physicians navigating complex wealth, tax, and exit planning decisions. Pete is the co author of Runaway Decade and The Challenges of Big League Money, and he is also leads Cetera Advisors' second largest OSJ enterprise, supporting and mentoring over 80 advisors across the country. He's currently serving as the chair of Cetera Financial Group's top leadership council, the Advisor Engagement Council, one of which that I belong to, am a member of. Without further ado, Pete Bush.
Hey, what's happening?
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Mr. Esley, how we been? How we been?
I'm doing good. I slept here all night waiting for this.
Yeah,
Watch
that's
my
awesome.
my battery's gonna die on my laptop.
I've been waiting all night. That's awesome.
I'm lucky to get to talk to the sensei here. So
I don't know about that.
very excited. Yes, but we sit on advisory engagement council with Cetera, and you actually chair that council, which kudos to you. I think they couldn't have picked a better person. But yeah, so I've been in the business for about 25 years. Iron Tree Financial is kind of a rebrand of my own personal practice over the last couple of years. Managed for quite a few years, and then when I went back in the field when I had my kids, because you know how it is, you want to spend a little bit more time with the family. I rebranded and I was behind the game because I was managing all those years. So the only way to scale was to work in the succession planning place and acquire practices, which we've been doing over the last couple of years. I think the most eye-opening part is the fact that we've kind of built a system around onboarding of larger books that's given us less than a 1% attrition in that succession planning process. So but like yourself, we help all clients in all avenues of finance. But most importantly, people don't, right? They don't talk to advisors. They're not going
Right,
back and forth like, how does an advisor retire? Right. And
right.
that's why I like your podcast because you're teaching an advisor how to retire.
Yeah, and it does have overlaps out into the rest of the business world. I mean, other professionals for sure. I mean, because I think, attorneys and CPAs and, architects and all kinds of people also are faced with similar, hurdles and ideas about what do they do next and how do they approach that. We actually do some lunch and learns here in the office. That I call maximum value, zero regret. And it's really about like how do you grow your enterprise value and get the most out of it, but also get over to the other side where, there's some stat out there that says 70+% of business owners regret selling a year later. And I think some of that is just maybe not doing the planning on the front end for like, what are you going to do next? So you've been through this as a buyer of existing practices and of course, folding them into Iron Tree. How do you see that transition type of mindset go with maybe the retiring advisors that you are, merging in?
Well, I think first and foremost, most people that are selling their practice are just coming from one side, right? They're coming from what's my valuation and what am I going to get out of the practice and how am my clients going to be serviced? But they're not understanding the buyer side, right? Like, what's my risk? What if the clients don't come over? Am I overpaying for the practice? So I think we do a nice job of educating an advisor on what the risk is for us as a buyer.
Right.
Because you're dealing in a world that you've never been in before. You're been helping clients, but now you're thrown into this succession planning, space where maybe you've had a lot of failures trying to get there, right? We've all had them, right? It's like you see somebody that's like, oh, I'm going to get a junior advisor, then you try to train them and they can't get licensed, and then you're back at square one, or you get a junior advisor to come in and they're not who you thought they were, and then you're back at square one, right? And then you're restarting that. So, I think where we do is it paint that picture of what does onboarding look like? What's the value add for you? And then more importantly, what's the value add for your clients? Because it's a much easier conversation if you're retiring and you're giving a value add to your clients. I'm
Right.
going over to Iron Tree or whatever firm that might be because of this, and this, right? What
Right.
sets you aside from that? So, and you have that experience. I mean, you see it all the time.
Yeah, you said something very important there, which is the risks, or the risk side. And, I think while somebody still has time, perhaps the best thing they can do is look through that buyer's lens and de-risk that transaction for the buyer. So if you have concentrated revenue into one or just a number of relationships, that adds to the risk. If you have a much older client book that, may pass on their assets to their heirs shortly after a sale, and you don't have the heirs as clients, that adds to the buyer's risk, and on and on. And you probably can name some other ones, but there's a lot of those little hurdles that if you have time and you're a year or two out, or even 3 or 4 or 5 years out, you can start to look at that and go, I need to clean this up a little bit, or I need to make it the most attractive possible. And probably the best thing is to start working with someone ahead of time, 2 or 3, 4 years before the sale. Go ahead and decide who it's going to be. And maybe you're not going to trigger the sale till down the line, but you can, in essence, clean things up for the buyer.
Yeah, and I think the future of the industry is practices like ours that are specifically developing themselves and designing themselves around onboarding. Because that's not an easy task, right? Everybody says they want to buy a book, but when you start throwing hundreds of households or thousands of households into a functioning company that isn't overstaffed and not prepared for it,
Right.
your attrition rate goes through the roof,
Right.
right? And our focus is how do we get to the client as fast as possible, face to face, right? And that's why I love the podcast and the digital media like you're in, I'm in, is that it's a warm feeling of I know the person
Yeah.
without meeting the person, right?
Yeah.
It's fame status in a sense. Like everybody knows Matthew McConaughey, and they
Right.
want to go up and just chat like they knew him for life, but they've seen like 100 episodes of his movies, right?
Right. Feel
But
like,
yeah,
yeah.
it's the same thing with a client, right? When you onboard, if you can get a video or a digital presence out to them, whether it's educational or why the change is happening, your attrition rate goes way down. So it removes a lot of that risk for me as a buyer, because now I know like, hey, I have these warm touches, so to speak. It bought me a couple months to get full reviews in with the clients and the exiting rep. So now the clients feel more comfortable when they meet me the first time with that succession planning rep because they've already seen me 2 or 3 times on a podcast or digital media, right? But I think that's the future is how do you onboard? Because
Yeah. You're hitting on that, know, like, and trust. I mean, that's who people do business with, and familiarity breeds trust. So whether they like you or not, I mean, they might be able to determine through a video like this, like, it seems like a nice dude. And, I mean, I think we could see ourselves seeing him again, sitting across the table from him or whatever. But that familiarity breaks down that wall that you have to tear down with every person, which is, can you trust us, right?
yeah,
And hopefully that transfer of trust from the selling advisor is, you have, like you said, you have a couple of times where you can meet with them to transfer that trust. That usually bodes well for the transition.
yeah, and we're in the infancy stages of where you're at now. I mean, you've got over 80 advisors nationwide, and you've built up that practice over the years because you've been focused on it.
Right.
So it's encouraging to see, the guardsmen, so to speak, of the secret sauce,
Yeah.
already doing it because it encourages me to say, hey, what's Pete doing? Let me check him out, right? I do a lot of show prep. I've got a great book here, Runaway Deck.
Hey, look at
You know,
that.
so I'm gonna hook you up next time. I'm gonna get a signature, I think, on this thing. Get it signed a little bit here. But like yourself, look, I enjoy show prep. I enjoy chatting, and one thing I did delve into was it was a nickname that you had, and I didn't realize that we had to call you Little Farmer Pete. I mean,
Oh yeah. I know who you've been talking to too.
yeah,
Yeah. No, people that know me now as an adult would not know that about me, that I grew up on a 40-acre farm in Indiana before I moved to Louisiana when I was 13. And yeah, I have a little Farmer Pete picture, which is pretty interesting. It looks, it's in black and white, so it looks like I was born during the Dust Bowl of the 1930s or something. But anyway, it's a pretty funny picture. I've learned to, do a little self-deprecating humor about, right?
Yeah. Well, look, there's something to be said about growing up in a small town. It really teaches your relationship.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
I mean, I've lived in larger cities and you don't know your neighbors for 3 or 4 years while you're living there,
that's
right?
true.
But that's what makes us special when people look at moving their practice to us is that we have that ingrained nature in us to develop a relationship, right? What
Absolutely.
what have you found is the like kind of the biggest obstacles, right, with growth for Horizon? Because I know as you scale, the growth rate becomes harder to do, right? It's harder to grow 20% each year. So, you're at scale now, but like what do you see as your biggest issues with growth or succession planning?
Yeah, we're in this chapter where I just had a couple calls about that this morning. We're in this chapter where the firm has gotten big enough now where we have to start thinking about the equity value of the enterprise as currency. And that currency can be used to reward employees and partners. It can be used as equity swap type currency to do mergers of equals or just acquire people that maybe aren't quite ready. We've been focused on acquiring those books of advisors that are ready to move on. Can you acquire businesses that aren't ready to move on yet they want a partner to grow? And so that's been sort of the front burner, sort of issue that we've been dealing with now, which has led us down the path of getting a updated valuation so that we can track this equity like a stock and have an outside third party basically, give us an official finger on the pulse of the value versus us, doing one of these and going, yeah, we have this many assets under management. It should be this multiple, whatever. Going ahead and formalizing that so that there's a trusted third party. And then you do turn that part of your practice into currency that can be used, whether you decide to use it or not, or whether just to track it is up to you. But it takes it to another level once you start doing that. So, I do think that's a problem slash opportunity that comes out of growth that maybe you don't have when you're smaller, and you don't really need it when you're smaller necessarily. But I would argue you need it probably sooner than what we're doing. We should have done it years ago, but
Yeah.
so it's still a good step to think about.
Well, that's the value to teaming in the first place, right? Is we're efficiently creating our own succession plan
Yeah.
with our partners and our families. Like, my team, we've got a lot of young guys. Our kids range from, newborn pretty much, up to 15, 16 years old, with the hope as parents that they take over a part or a portion, so that equity valuation and the share valuation conversation comes up all the time with us is, how can we maximize retirement, but then also not strap our kids with a payment that that then makes it harder for them entering the industry, right? And I think that clients appreciate that when they see what you're trying to build and that you're not looking at just building a company to sell it, right?
Right.
Or exit. That even your own blood's going to be involved in helping to service them. It paints a very nice picture that clients can gravitate towards, and that adhesion of the client is greater, I think, from a team, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and I find, and this is probably what you're going through with some of the practices, is sometimes the books that we turn away are more important than the books that we acquire. Whether
Well, yeah.
you know
No,
cult
yeah, that's that old thing of you show me, you show me the business you're turning away, I'll show you the quality of your business.
yeah.
And it's another way of saying the same thing. And I think that is true because you would have had to have some standards in place to make that call where you would have said, this doesn't really fit us. Doesn't fit our culture, doesn't fit the business mix we're looking for, the type of client we want to serve and all those things. And yeah, I think that's part of your strategy. And that comes out with business you turn away.
What fascinates me the most, Pete, is in meeting with as many people looking for succession planning as I do, they don't know what questions to ask. I relate it to, have you ever done a college orientation where
Yeah, well, it's
right,
been a while, but yeah, sure.
parents go to check out Harvard, Yale, whatever it might be with their kids, and when I used to recruit, I used to go to these colleges and just sit in the background. And the questions from parents weren't like, what's your placement ratio? What programs do you have after college? It was, what movies do you show? Right? Like totally wrong questions that as a parent I would be asking.
How long does the cafeteria stay open at
Yeah,
night?
yeah. How long? Yeah. Do they have, free pizza night? But advisors are the same way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's sometimes it's not even the right questions that they should be asking, and that's why I think like podcasts like your podcast and our podcast is so important in educating that massive demographic of our industry as far as even what do you ask, right?
Yeah.
What should you be concerned about?
This is a great point. I mean, the book you held up earlier, whenever I describe that book to people, I say, this is not going to give you all the answers. What it's going to do is help you ask yourself all the right questions, right? And I think that's very valuable because if, in essence, if you provide the context of a question, the person, because we're all individuals, we're all one of one. Every advisor, my joke that I always say, which is not a joke at all, is if you've met one independent financial advisor, you've met one. They may rhyme a little bit, but and overlap a little bit, but they're all unique. And so the idea there is if you provide a context with, for them to think within, then they're going to provide their own content, which is their answers to those specific questions or the way that they might think about what they want in the future. That's their content. But your context is, man, let's look ahead down the line 3 years from now. And let's say we're out there and we're looking back to today, that old Dan Sullivan question from Strategic Coach, right? It's like, what has to happen for you to be happy? Well, that is a standard question. You could ask an engineer, you could ask a lawyer, you could ask a financial advisor, or somebody retiring from Exxon Mobil, and they're going to put their own content into that. And that's why what you said is so important, is they don't know what questions to ask. So if guides like us can provide them with some sort of framework, some sort of context to think within, and let them fill in their own content to that, you get the conversations rolling along. And you've been very successful at that. So I know that's part of what you're doing.
Yeah, well, part of it's right. Part of it's when you're engaging with that advisor that's looking to sell their practice, it is literally just like you would, mentor a new rep that came in, is you're giving that advisor the words to say to their clients.
Yeah.
And that's the most powerful in keeping a client in your succession plan is imagine just somebody going up randomly to their client and saying, hey, I'm retiring next year. By the way, I'm with Iron Tree, right?
Yeah.
Or with Horizon, right? Versus that person going up and saying, hey, look, these are all the reasons I picked this team to help continue your planning. Oh, and by the way, they're also going to be my advisor when I retire because I trust in their planning strategy, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge difference in the client's mind, right? And
Absolutely.
and advisors that might be listening to this podcast, whether we believe it or not, your clients, when you walk out, if you've got less hair or gray hair like you and I do, they're asking you like, hey, when's Jim or Steve going to be retiring because they're getting old, right? So
Yeah.
you got to
Yeah.
get answers.
That age old question, what happens to us if something happens to you? And if they don't vocalize that, they're definitely thinking it. And so what's the best approach is to answer that question before they ask it by just going ahead and telling them, look, man, hey, if something ever happens to me, we have a team here. We approach all of our client business as a team, or in your case with a succession opportunity. This is the reason I'm coming here, because there's risk out there, what would you call a single point of failure in a system. The single point of failure is it's all riding on one advisor. Here we have a team, and I want to make sure that you guys are protected and cared for in case something happens. That's a great story, and you go ahead and hit it up front without the client having to think it in their mind, not wanting to ask anyone like, hey, what happens if you die? Nobody wants to ask that question. So, but they are thinking it.
Yeah. And I find, at least from the advisor standpoint, the hardest is pulling the trigger. That they will procrastinate and they won't pull the trigger. And some of that's the same as our clients for retirement is they financially can retire, but they don't.
Right.
Right. And I think what's important for the advisor to understand, just like their clients, is look, the golden years are only as long as you're healthy. And,
True.
and that could change at the drop of a hat with an accident or a bad diagnosis from the doctor. And do you really not want to live the golden years with your spouse that, and in our industry, spouse has been sitting on the sideline a lot for a lot of hours,
Yeah.
right? Do you really want to sacrifice those golden years by just the procrastination of not pulling the trigger, right? Or it's the anxiety, right? Depression comes in sometimes when people retire because they don't have their social network built up, their activities,
Yeah.
their volunteer work and stuff like that. So I find being a life coach to a lot of these advisors is just as valuable because it moves them to pull the trigger.
Yeah, some of that's about losing relevancy. They socialize with these people anyway, and part of that is they're talking about their business that they have with them and everything. And I think you have to find solutions to that, or you're not going to get over to the other side. And it's different with each person, but to some extent, you can have a trailing off of the amount of time you're spending in the business versus just truncating. We've done it both ways. Some of those truncations work perfectly, and the person had already made a great plan on the other side. Some of them, waited to a health event, truncated it, and then they're on the other side. They're having to deal with health issues and loss of relevancy. So I think all of these things come together to cry out really for this pre-planning. And just to, none of us are promised the sun's coming up tomorrow or that we'll be there to see it if it does, right? The old phrase. So it's one of those where you can take some steps. It doesn't mean you got to shut it down. You can just put some safety nets in place. A large majority of people don't have that. I would encourage everybody to reach out to either one of us, depending on where you're at, what type of business channel you're in. I know we didn't get to that, but I know that's part of the beauty of Cetera is it has different options for different types of advisors, from W-2 all the way to independent RIA to dual registered to to your model and everything else. I mean, so it's a pretty Swiss Army knife approach for a financial advisor to be able to plug into if they're looking for a backstop.
Yeah, and the varying platform should be a question that advisors looking to retire should be asking, because the platform they're on right now may not be the suitable platform for them to transfer their book to. They
That's
might
right.
actually benefit a different platform, from a service standpoint, from a valuation standpoint, from a support standpoint, or whatever that might be. I guess the question I would ask you, because I weigh this in my mind when I'm buying a book, is there's a couple different rules of thought to it. I'm just interested on maybe how Horizon views it. Is when you buy a practice, some firms have a set in stone approach. Here's our valuation. Here's exactly how the buyout works. Here's your terms. And then our firm, it takes a little bit more of a like, hey, I want you to paint that paintbrush of how you want to retire. And then we try to accommodate that around our structure. So two different drastic views. You have a thought or some maybe ideas on how you see that?
Yeah, I think it is a collaboration. I think you have to weigh in what they want with what's best for the business and the clients and everything else, because I've seen some things that were a little too muddy also, where it was confusing to clients. It was like, oh, well, he's bringing in these other folks, but he's winding down, but then he pops back in and is asking, acting like he's our advisor again, like we're kind of confused, like what's going on. So I think the best approach is yes, weigh both sides, but there has to be a definite finish line, because of what you said earlier in this conversation. Advisors are notoriously good at hanging around, and it's a really easy business to not retire from them. So they don't, right? And they
Yeah.
can continue to just hang around. So I do think a lot of the most successful things we've done is it doesn't matter if it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. It's just that you go ahead and put in their mind and your mind, like there's an end to this, where you don't show up here anymore and you're not going to have any relationships with clients and things like that. Not put that in a harsh way, but just put it in a way of, look, it's best for the clients, at the end of the day. So there's no confusion and they know who to call to get advice from. Socialize all you want, go to dinner all you want, but at the end of the day, the business piece needs to have some line of demarcation, let's call
Yeah, and to your point, I think Cetera's got a great platform for that with a multi-channel platform.
Right.
We see it behind the scenes, which a lot of even advisors in Cetera don't see. But
Right.
I'm encouraged by it because I get to hang out with people like yourself,
Yeah.
and have some good camaraderie with just a think tank section that, like, really, I take more away from those sessions that I implement in my practice every time we meet. Uh,
Absolutely.
so thank you for being a mentor to us younger guys. I always say younger. I don't think I'm that much younger. Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I've been at this 35 years now. You're right. There's a lot of people at it that are younger than me. I've always said, the average age of the financial advisor was always like a year or two above where I was, right? So when I was 57, the average age was 58. When I'm 58, the average age was 59. And I think now, like I'm catching up to the average. And it was all my joke was always like, this is the only part of my life that I'm happy to be below average. But
I,
uh, but now I think I'm getting on average because as you get older, you're becoming part of that, and then there's a lot of young people backfilling. But no, it's one of the things I love about the Horizon Advisor Network is I love coaching, I love mentoring younger advisors. We have the young group in here, the four people in their early to mid 20s that I call G3. G2 has been the moniker for the next generation. Well, this is the next generation to them, so I'm calling them the G3s. And just this week, I sat in there and we kind of had the open mic discussion. Almost like ask me anything. What do you guys want to know? We got in really rich, deep conversations that by leaving it open ended. And so, no, to your point, I love these councils. I love these committees. I love doing the work to help Cetera get better. Because they're like every other business. They want to know how can we improve service to you so that you can improve service to your clients. And I do think Cetera is unique in the way that they've structured this council that we're on, where the advisors like you and I have a seat at the table. We do have a voice in really making a difference in moving the needle on some of the big issues.
Yeah, I just picked up a couple of things that you said that, like, just off the top of my head is similar to what we do. And I think this is super important is if you're exponentially growing with this type of approach of succession planning or purchasing books, is you've got to paint that ultimate picture for your staff. Your advisors, your mentees, they've got to understand what you're trying to build and what that big picture looks like, and how fast you can exponentially grow, because
Yeah,
it's really the only way that you can exponentially grow, past the normal level, right? You run into, at least I run into in the Northeast and in Tampa a little bit, the average advisors, in that 30 to 50 million range,
yeah, that's right.
right? And that's after 30 some years of practice, right?
Yeah.
So how do you break out of that? And how do you, well, the easiest way is to acquire a practice.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah, you're either set up to acquire or you're set up to be acquired. So to your point, a 30-40 million dollar practice is really set up to be acquired,
yeah,
especially if they don't have a team, because to acquire does require having a team around you.
yeah,
Because each human has a capacity about the number of, you can have a big number of accounts. You can't have a big number of client relationships that are active, that are personal, that you can go deep with. You could have 1,000 accounts, but you can't really have 1,000 meaningful personal relationships as an advisor. It's just impossible. So I do think that you do have different types of entrepreneurs in this business, and those that you describe may be more along the lines of the lifestyle entrepreneur that just doesn't really care to blow it out and doesn't want to manage a bunch of people and deal with the chaos of that. Or maybe they tried it and they had the wrong people and they're like, I'm not doing that again. I'll just hire my wife part time, and see a lot of that. Again, the trust issues. They trust that person for sure, even though they may not be qualified to do the job. They trust them, and that's how they function. But those three types of entrepreneurs: the survival, which is just basically, they're paying the bills and they're getting by, but and there's a lot of entrepreneurs in a lot of industries that are just surviving. Lifestyle is you start to check the boxes on the car you want to drive and the house you have and the country club you want to belong to, whatever. You travel when you want to. but it's still about you and your lifestyle, and it's not about something bigger. And then these achievement entrepreneurs, which I put you in this class, myself in this class, is, there's no number we're trying to get to. We're just trying to grow each year. We're trying to be more ambitious. We're trying to grow one year after the next. And that attracts, it's crazy, but that actually attracts the other people you need to build a team, because they see like this is about more than one person's goals and dreams. This is about something that I could maybe have a hand in helping grow, and they have to see themselves in that picture. And achievement entrepreneurs attract those types of people to their teams.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you so much for doing a joint session.
Yeah, this was fun, man. I'm glad you reached out. And of course, I know we'll see each other next week on our call. And I appreciate all the inputs that you have, and what you're doing to help make Cetera better as well from your lens of your firm.
Nice. Well, I'm going to do a little outro for our show, and then obviously, you guys can check out Your Time, Your Money anytime you want on IronTreeFinancial.com. You can go there for our podcast, YouTube, Spotify as well. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the likes. And once again, very, very thankful for Pete Bush and this joint intellectual session that we had today. Check out his books, Runaway Decades, one of them, and hopefully I'll get a signed copy instead of just getting this one off of Amazon that was sent to me. And then you also are the author of Challenges of Big League Money, so I'm anxious to get that one as well. But thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I really enjoyed the conversation. We'll talk next time.
Thanks, Pete. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Your Time, Your Money. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to share this with friends, family, coworkers, anyone else that you think might be interested. If you do have questions or topics, you can always email them to IronTreeFinancial@CeteraIS.com. Please follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Spotify, Google Play, and many other sources that were available. And as always, it's your time and your money. Cetera Investors is the marketing name of Cetera Investment Services. Securities and insurance products are offered through Cetera Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity.